Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 88.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media. Just search for Dogworks Radio. And joining us, calling in from Southern California, is the co-host of Mushing Radio, Alex. How's it going?
It's going great, Robert. I had a very nice and relaxing Thanksgiving, and hopefully all our listeners did as well. We're taping this a couple days after Thanksgiving, and I am excited that we are getting towards, hopefully, the mushing season in earnest.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. You know, you mentioned Thanksgiving, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about climate change here in just a second. Typically, Alex, Thanksgiving Day is sort of the benchmark for us getting out on sleds here in the Willow area, the Mat-Su Valley, and we almost always take out a couple of teams while the turkey's in the oven and, you know, do a 20 or a 30-mile run, and we have not had a chance to do that. It's nothing but a sheet of ice around here. Most of the lakes are not passable, and it's turning out to be quite the early season, at least here in the Willow area. What do you think about this climate change and what we're facing here moving into the mushing season?
You know, I think a lot of people think of climate change merely in terms of the weather getting warmer, but we saw, I believe earlier in November, there was a single day in Anchorage that set a record both for the highest temperature and the most snow, because it was very warm, and then a cold front came in and dropped below zero and brought a whole bunch of snow. And I think that what we're going to see as the climate starts changing more, in addition to it being generally warmer on average, I think we're going to see a lot of kind of inconsistent weather where it gets below freezing and it snows and things freeze, and then the temperatures go way up and things start to thaw, or it rains, or it gets muddy, and that's really difficult to, if nothing else, you can't really build snowpack, and you can't really build good conditions on the ground to go out on sleds. So I think that there's going to be, in the next 10 years or so, there's going to be a lot more of these kind of conditions that are just really messy, and that's going to make it harder for people to train, and it's going to make it harder for a lot of the races to be held.
I totally agree with you there, Alex. You know, in previous shows we've talked about the effects of mushing in the future, and we've talked about the economics of mushing, and of course we've talked about climate change. And if you're a big fan of mushing on Facebook, you'll see quite a few teams are driving up north to the Denali Highway, where there is plenty of snow. I guess they've been on sleds since about October, but that's really where the economics of mushing come into play. Not all the teams can take off work for a week or so and drive 200 miles north just to do a couple of sled dog runs, because most of them, I would say by and large, are working mushers, and they just can't afford stuff like that, can they?
Right, and it's in addition to everything else, we're likely looking at the price of gasoline going up in general, over the next decade or so, and it can be really expensive to take a truck and to take a dog truck up on the highway, and we think that of our family cars, which get much better mileage now than they did when I was a kid. But if you've got a vehicle that has enough power to tow a dog truck and a dozen or 20 dogs, you're not going to be getting very good mileage on that. So that's a very expensive thing in terms of money, and also, as you said, in terms of time and people being able to, just have the time to spend 3 or 4 hours driving and then do training runs.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple of months. We're about 3 months away or so from Iditarod and about 2.5 months from the Yukon Quest. So time is creeping up on us pretty quickly. And this is more of an update show than anything. We're going to talk about some of those upcoming races that are going to be happening, some of the qualifiers and the longer races. But we're going to jump right into this first and talk about the Iditarod and their signups. I believe the signups end, or at least the signups for without an early entry fee, without a late fee, happens here today on November 30th. And we have some really late signups, don't we, Alex?
Yeah, we're currently officially looking at the Iditarod page. We've got 53 teams signed up, and then Rick Casillo, who had signed up, has withdrawn. The latest ones are Zoya Denur, Magnus Kaltenborn, and Jeremy Keller. But looking at Facebook in the past couple of days, I saw there were a couple of posts from Jeff King, who had that rotator cuff injury, and he posted that he posted a picture with his orthopedic surgeon and said that he had his recovery, his surgeon said, was in the top 1% of all patients. And then he posted a picture of an envelope that he was mailing off to the Iditarod Trail Committee, indicating that he is going to be running Iditarod in 2020, which was sort of up in the air because he wasn't sure how his healing was going to go. So that's very exciting. Jeff King has said that he is not running this race to win it at this point, but he has come very close relatively recently. So I don't think that he's ever someone that you can write off. And then we also saw on Facebook that Paige Drobny announced that she is going to be entering the Iditarod, and she just sent off her entry. So we have at least those two additional ones, and then you never know who else is going to come in before the deadline. And as you mentioned, people can enter later and just pay the late fee.
Right, but it is a pretty significant late fee, isn't it? Well over $1,000 for that late entry. Yeah,
and I am not sure exactly how it's structured, and if it goes up again, after January or after February, but it's a pretty substantial amount. I also saw on Thanksgiving that Jim Lanier, who has scratched in the past few Iditarods he's entered, and whose entry to the 2020 Iditarod was turned down, and I believe we talked about that a little bit before. And he had a post on Facebook yesterday where he was thanking all of his fans for supporting him, and he said that he met with Iditarod officials who said that they are interested in seeing him come back and compete in the Iditarod for a sixth calendar decade, because he has competed in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the aughts, and the teens. So he said that in order to do this, he has to requalify by running 3 mid-distance races, and he's going to try to do all of those this coming mushing season. And then he says, if the qualifying board deems me worthy, I could run the race, perhaps even in 2020. So I think it would be, I'm never going to say never, but it would be difficult for him to get all three of those and qualify. So I think we're probably looking at him trying to come back in 2021 instead of 2020. But it is very exciting to see him taking up this challenge and wanting to come back and run the race again.
Well, Alex, it is logistically possible to be able to do that. Most of his qualifying races will be finished by the end of January, first week of February, if he's doing the Copper Basin and the Willow 300 and or even the Yukon Quest 300. All of those races will be done in time, and it would still give him about a month and a half or so to get that entry fee in. And, of course, he would have to pay that late fee, but he could easily get that in. And, again, apologize for the dog barking there, but it could easily be done in time.
Yeah, and it would, I think, be a very exciting story for him to be told that he has to requalify and be able to do that so quickly and then run the 2020 race. That would be something that I, as a fan, would be very excited to see.
I would as well. Alex, the next thing I would like to talk about is the meeting with PETA. It happened just a couple of months ago with the head of Iditarod, and I believe Jeff King was there as well. What do you have on that? I know it's been a month or two in the past.
Yeah, so there has been, I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but I think a chilly relationship at the very best between PETA and Iditarod for many years, and PETA has been vocally outspoken about being anti-Iditarod and trying to stop the Iditarod from being run, and just generally being against any dog being used as a sled dog, and being against things like dogs being chained to dog houses in dog yards and dog lots. So the new CEO of the ITC decided that he was going to open a dialogue with them and have a meeting. I had very, very low expectations that anything positive would come out of this, and they had the meeting, and I'm not sure what the exact what the exact outcome of it was, but basically nothing really was resolved. I think I admire Iditarod for attempting to have a dialogue with PETA. It's a little bit difficult because PETA as an organization is so fundamentally opposed to the idea of sled dogs and of understanding that working dogs are different from dogs that you have as house pets in the lower 48. That it's a little bit hard to find any real common ground there.
I totally agree with you, and at least he can say that they tried, and that's the best that they could possibly do. But, they are a very interesting organization. I was watching the University of Georgia football game the other day, and they have a mascot called Uga. He is a bulldog, and, he's been there. They've had that mascot for years, decades. And shortly after that game, PETA posted on Facebook a picture of the dog, and they said that they are putting a petition together to oust that mascot. So no dog is safe from PETA, are they?
Right, they're not. And I'm generally opposed to these sort of zero tolerance policies. I think that there's, in a lot of aspects of life, we run across these zero tolerance policies that don't necessarily seem to make a lot of common sense. And I worry that's really kind of what guides PETA as an organization. You can certainly, I don't think anyone who is a Mushing fan or anyone who listens to this podcast or anyone who runs dogs competitively or is even thinking of running dogs competitively wants for any dog to be mistreated. And so the question really is, how do you make sure that dogs are treated well? And I think that that's something that that the Iditarod and that most mushers who are around Iditarod or want to run Iditarod are very concerned with. And there's always the opportunity to make dog care a little bit better and to make the dogs healthier and better taken care of. But when you have an organization whose policy seems to be this is inherently bad and nothing you do will justify it and nothing you do can make it better, it's kind of hard to have any kind of conversation under those circumstances.
I totally agree. Could not have said it better myself for sure. And it's always interesting to see how it's going to play out. Of course, any of these rogue groups have an agenda, and that agenda will continue no matter what happens for sure. Let's move to the next topic. And in the last couple of months, there's been a lot of hubbub about sled dog movies. And I know that The Great Alaskan Race came out about a month or so ago, and I know that Harrison Ford is going to be starring in Call of the Wild, and Disney Plus has been released since we've been on the air last, and the new movie Togo, also a Serum Run movie, will be released probably at the beginning of the year, and that is the movie that stars Willem Dafoe and has ties to Iditarod and Martin Bucer. I know he was the technical advisor for all the mushing scenes. What do you think about all these sled dog movies that are coming out?
I, as someone who's developing a sled dog movie, I am very excited about it. But anything that can draw positive attention to the sport and that can draw positive attention to the people who train and run dogs and can, show how heroic and amazing these dogs are. I think that is all very, very good.
I'm looking forward to seeing the other two that are soon to be released, and I hope we can have a chance to give our take on them or our review about them in the coming future. Speaking of the Serum Run, on our last episode, we did an update about a trip that we're planning here in February, the Serum Run Trail Expedition. I'm spearheading that, and we have 12 people that are going to be crossing the state of Alaska here in the next few months. And I'm pleased to announce that everything looks good as long as the weather cooperates with us. And one of the cool things that we're going to do for our service project, Alex, is there's a new movie coming out about George Atla, and the name of the movie is called Atla. And we're going to be showing that film as part of our service project along the trail at some of these community centers and schools, and we're looking real forward to that because that mushing program that George Atla started really helps out still in the villages, and I'm really excited that that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's very exciting that is happening, and I'm not sure where exactly you're planning on showing it, but I would imagine that there are going to be in some of these places friends or relatives of George Atla who will be able to see the movie and perhaps participate in that. So that's exciting as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We're going to be showing it in a lot of those schools and community centers along the trail. We're going to be stopping in places like Galena and Ruby and White Mountain and Unalakleet and some of the bigger places along the trail there, and looking forward to getting some feedback and hopefully really starting some real good conversation about dog training and of course dog care and mushing in some of those villages where unfortunately a lot of the times that is a a dying sport. Now that snow machines have come in, and the cost of keeping a dog team in the villages is really expensive and sometimes prohibitive to a lot of the families out there.
Yeah, and it's also it's particularly exciting, I think, that that you're going to be directly in these villages. And one of the criticisms that we hear sometimes about races like Iditarod and the Yukon Quest is that they roll through and they don't give much back to the villages. And so that's why I'm very excited that part of this Serum Run project is to be conscious of this and to be deliberately thinking ahead for how you can give back to these villages. And I just think that's really admirable, and that's one of my favorite things about that trip.
Yeah, I can't wait, and I'm looking forward to sharing our trail stories when we get back on here on Mushing Radio. Let's switch over to the next topic. I'm looking here on Iditarod.com, and again, we're recording this the last weekend of November, and it looks like the Iditarod auction opens up tomorrow, and that's always a fun program, isn't it, Alex? Can you describe that for our listeners, please?
Yeah, so the Iditaroders are the people who ride in the sled for the Anchorage ceremonial start. So they ride for, I believe it's about 11 miles, and they are there with with each Iditarod musher, and often there is a second sled that comes behind them to sort of slow them down so they're not going too fast. It's a great opportunity to spend some real quality time with the mushers before the race and during the race, and people will have their cameras and their cell phones, and they'll take video and they'll take pictures, and it gives you a real sense of what it's like to be behind a dog team. Although you're in the sled, so you're not driving the dog team, but it gives you a real sense of what that journey is like. And every year the Iditarod has these auctions, and I believe you can just buy an Iditarod slot outright for I think in the past it's been $7,500, or you can, and the top riders, the riders who have been Iditarod champions, those usually go for that amount or close to that amount. And for the rest of the riders, it's done on an auction. So you can bid a few $100s or $1,000 and potentially get chosen as an Iditarider, and all that money goes to the ITC to help pay for and support the race.
Yeah, you're right, Alex. The instant purchase for a spot is $7,500. The starting bid is $850. Then it can go up into increments from that. It goes on between December 1st and January 17th. And it looks like right now that Jesse Royer, Ali Zirkle, and Martin Booser have already locked up their Iditariders. So somebody has already paid that $7,500 fee for those three. And I'm sure we will see quite a few of those fill up really quickly, especially for more of those more well-known and or popular, not necessarily popular, but name brand mushers that everybody knows, don't you think?
Yeah, and I've talked to a bunch of people in the past who've been Iditariders, and they always say that it is just the most fun thing that they get to do, and they're treated as celebrities, not as much celebrities as the mushers or the dogs, but they're treated as kind of second-level celebrities for the period right up until the Iditarod starts. So it's a really, really fun thing for people to do, and a good way for the Iditarod to raise some money to help support the race.
Our next update is going to talk about the qualifying races that are going to be coming up in the upcoming season. I know we started off Alex, talking about climate change at the top of the show. We also talked about the Denali Highway, where a lot of folks are going up to do that early training. And that is the spot for the first race of the year. It's going to take place next weekend. It's called the Alpine Excursions Race. And it goes from right there at the start of the highway in Cantwell onward to one of the cabins up there, and then they spend the night, and then they turn around and come back. Now, this race is not a qualifier per se, but it is truly the first race of the season, and a lot of folks use it as sort of a shakedown race or the beginning of the season race to see how their teams shake out and kind of go from there. Then we don't have another big race until the first weekend of January, and that's when the Connect 200 race kicks off. And that one I would tend to bet is a little bit iffy right now, with about a month or so before that race starts, with the conditions that we have here in Willow, where a lot of those trails are. A couple of weeks later, we have the Copper Basin 300, and that race is almost full, or is full at the time of recording this podcast. And then about a week and a half after that, we have the Willow 300, and following that is the Yukon Quest, and then the Yukon Quest 300, which run together. And then we have shortly thereafterwards the Two Rivers 200, which is also a qualifier. And then the same folks that are putting on this race this coming weekend have started up a brand new qualifier. It's called the Alpine Creek 200 and the Alpine Creek 300 along the highway there. The 300 will cross the entire highway from Cantwell over to Paxton, then I believe it goes back, and that's a brand new qualifier, and I'm looking forward to that. And of course, there's a lot of other shorter races or lesser known races in there. I know Jesse Holmes is trying, I believe it is Jesse Holmes who's trying to get another qualifying race going. And also Nick Pettit is trying to get another qualifying race over in the Glen Allen area, which will be really interesting. And speaking of the Glen Allen area, the Copper Basin 300 is going to be running backwards for the first time in many years this year. Typically, they start and finish in Glen Allen there, but this year they're going to be running the trail the opposite direction, which will be interesting because folks that have been on trails many times in the past, they know where to stop, they know where, you're going uphill and downhill, but when you're going the opposite way, all of those hills that you're used to either trudging up and then flying down will be in the opposite direction, sort of like doing NASCAR, where everything is a right-handed turn versus left-handed turn. So I think it would be interesting to see how that plays out. Anything else you want to say about the qualifying races that are coming up?
Just that we are, as we're taping this, we are relatively early in the season. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, the snowpack is not very good, especially in the more southern parts of Alaska. So it remains to be seen what kind of snow year and what kind of temperature year we're going to be facing. And so a lot of these races, we've had years where a lot of the qualifying races had to be canceled, and that sort of that wreaks a little bit of havoc with people who are trying to qualify with for the Iditarod or the Yukon Quest. And hopefully we will have enough snow that all of these races can happen. But as you mentioned, almost every year there are a few races that have to be canceled because of the snow conditions. So we're still a little bit early, and it's hard to predict, how things are going to be a month from now or 6 weeks from now.
Right, and we forgot to mention sort of the granddaddy race of the qualifying season, the Kuskokwim 300. That's the race that's held over in Bethel, where they typically have well over $100,000 purse, and that usually attracts some really big-time teams there. I don't have the list in front of me, but I know that some very well-known names are already signed up for the race. And then, of course, the last race of the year is the Kobuk 440, which which takes place up in the Kotzebue area. That's the longest qualifying race here in Alaska, and I believe that starts the first weekend of April. So we're going to move into this season really quickly, and looking forward to doing a lot of race reports and following the season along. Anything else you want to mention in closing, Alex?
Just briefly wanted to thank longtime listeners and new listeners. And Robert and I are very easy to get a hold of. We're usually up on Twitter. And if people have any thoughts or questions or show ideas or things that are unclear to them, we would love to hear that from you guys and take that into account and perhaps develop future shows around things that you guys want to hear.
Excellent. As always, Alex, it's always a pleasure to be hosting the show with you. Looking forward to doing many more here in the coming season. And again, for all of our fans, please check us out over on social media, searching DogWorks Radio. Until next time, this is Robert Forto on behalf of my co-host, Alex Stein. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From DogWorks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio. Did you know that Alaska DogWorks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska DogWorks on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.